The soft hum of wedding music filled the air, echoing from the grand hall, dressed in ivory blooms and candlelight. But the moment she stepped in, something was wrong. The lights were dimmed, the staff stood still, and the banner that once bore her name was gone. A single sheet of paper fluttered from the planner's trembling hands, cancelled. Her breath caught in her throat as she looked toward the stage. And there, standing under the chandelier, her sister smiled like she had just won. The silence shattered with a scream that wasn't hers. What would you do if your own sister erased your wedding? Just to feel more important? And what secret could make her so calm while everything burned around her? The following morning, whispers swirled through the bridal suite like smoke. The planner refused to meet her eyes. Her phone buzzed with unanswered calls, and the air smelled faintly of wilted flowers. Every trace of joy felt rehearsed, mechanical, like someone had rewritten her story overnight. The sister arrived with croissants and a rehearsed apology, her words sugar-coated, her tone brittle. She said it was a mix-up, but the smirk tugging at her lips told another story entirely. Outside, the crew dismantled the wedding arch, white ribbons tossed into piles like forgotten dreams. She stepped onto the patio, demanding answers from the florist, the photographer, anyone. But all pointed to the same person who made the cancellations on her behalf. Her pulse raced, her voice cracked, and for the first time, she saw her sister watching from the balcony above, sipping coffee as if admiring her own chaos. By afternoon, she stormed into the event office. The contract bore her signature, but not her handwriting. Her mind raced. Who had the power, the access, and the motive? The answer arrived before the question could settle. The sister's perfume lingered on the pen beside the forged document. It smelled like betrayal, wrapped in lilacs. That evening, the sunset burned crimson through the window as the sisters met face to face in the empty hall. No guests, no laughter. Just the echo of everything ruined. You've always had everything, the sister hissed, stepping closer. It's my turn to shine. But before the bride could respond, a voice from behind whispered her name. A man's voice, soft yet familiar. And her sister's face drained of color. The secret was no longer safe. The next morning dawned with rain tapping on the glass like a warning. The venue felt hollow, stripped of celebration, replaced by hurried footsteps and whispered blame. Every vendor she called said the same thing. She told us the wedding was postponed. Her heart pounded as realization bled through her calm. The betrayal wasn't impulsive. It was orchestrated. She dialed her sister's number, but the call went unanswered, the silence mocking her through every ring. Somewhere nearby she heard laughter. Her sister's. Light, triumphant, cruel. She followed the trail of sabotage like a detective. The bakery refused her payment, claiming her sister had already covered everything. The dress boutique said her fitting was canceled. Each stop was another slice of humiliation. But it wasn't until she saw the catering truck pulling away with the wedding cake still intact that she broke into a run, shouting into the storm, voice raw and shaking. Her sister stood nearby, watching from her car. Window rolled down, music blasting. A song about freedom. By noon, the confrontation could no longer wait. She burst into the dressing suite where her sister lounged like a queen, legs crossed, scrolling through photos on her phone. Words collided midair. Accusations, denials, half-truths soaked in venom. You can't stand when people look at me, the sister sneered, tossing her phone aside. It's exhausting living in your shadow. The words landed like shards of glass. For a heartbeat, she almost believed them, until her sister's phone lit up with a message from someone she knew all too well. The truth flickered in her mind like lightning. Her sister's smirk wasn't victory, it was desperation. She realized the affair wasn't just a scandal, it was leverage. The sister needed the spotlight, needed distraction. And what better distraction than destroying a wedding? Still, she stayed silent, swallowing her rage, saving the revelation for when it would hurt most. Revenge, she decided, would not be loud. it would be time. That night, the rehearsal dinner glimmered under fairy lights, pretending everything was fine. The guests toasted, music played, and the sister charmed the crowd with a story about saving the wedding from disaster. But every word tasted bitter in the bride's mouth. She smiled through it, her hand trembling slightly against the stem of her glass. The secret she held burned brighter than the candles on the table. She raised her glass, eyes locking with her sister's, and said softly, "To truth." The sister's smile faltered. Just enough. Morning came wrapped in a silence too heavy to ignore. The once bustling venue now echoed with emptiness, as if holding its breath. She watched her sister glide across the garden in a designer gown, laughing with the photographer as if she were the bride. The audacity burned hotter than the sun above them. Every stolen glance, every fake smile felt like an open wound. The world saw perfection, but beneath the glitter she saw the cracks. And deep down she knew her sister was planning something bigger. Inside, the bridal suite had turned into a battleground of silence. Dresses hung untouched, shoes lined in perfect order, all meaningless now. The sister entered without knocking, humming the wedding march, feigning innocence. She mentioned a press invitation for a magazine shoot featuring the Sisters of the Year. It wasn't kindness, it was mockery. Her voice dripped with poison disguised as charm. For the first time, the bride didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled. A calm, terrifying kind of smile that promised retribution. The mother tried to play peacekeeper, calling both daughters into the study. The scent of old books filled the air as voices rose and clashed. Accusations, guilt, and the mother's thin patience unraveling. She begged them to act like family, but family was already broken. The bride stood still, her voice low but cutting. "You can't fix this," she said. "You've always chosen her." The words hit harder than intended, and for the first time their mother looked small, fragile, defeated. By sunset, the tension had curdled into something sharp. Guests arrived for cocktails, unaware of the emotional storm brewing upstairs. The bride slipped away to the balcony, watching her sister entertain the crowd below, performing like she'd rehearsed this all her life. Every laugh, every flirtatious glance fed her ego. But then, through the camera lens of a passing photographer, the bride saw it, her sister's hand brushing against the arm of the secret lover. The truth she'd been saving had just captured itself. That night, thunder rolled across the sky, mirroring the rage inside her. She replayed the images again and again. Proof of betrayal, proof of deceit. The decision was made. Tomorrow's rehearsal dinner would not be another humiliation. It would be a reckoning. As lightning flashed outside her window, she whispered to herself, "You wanted the spotlight? I'll make sure everyone sees you." In the next room, her sister laughed over the phone, unaware that her world was about to collapse. The rehearsal dinner began with forced laughter and clinking glasses, a glittering illusion of harmony. Every table sparkled with candles and champagne, yet beneath the soft music pulsed a quiet dread. She sat at the center table, smile perfectly rehearsed, heart thundering. Her sister was radiant, stealing glances at every camera, every guest, as if she were the bride herself. But the bride's calm wasn't weakness anymore. It was strategy. She looked around the table, taking in each face, already knowing which one would break first when the truth surfaced. The speeches began, light-hearted, sweet, predictable. The sister rose to speak next, her tone dripping with charm. She thanked her dearest sister for inspiring love and grace, her words hollow and rehearsed. The audience clapped, enchanted by the performance. But the bride's gaze never wavered. Her fingers toyed with the memory card hidden beneath the table. Every false word her sister spoke made the truth burn brighter. By the time the applause ended, she was ready to speak, and this time she wouldn't smile. When she stood, the room hushed. She began softly, thanking everyone for coming, her voice calm but steady, like a storm about to break. Then her tone shifted. She spoke of loyalty, of trust, of what happens when someone you love turns your happiness into their playground. The crowd leaned forward, uneasy smiles fading. Her sister's hand tightened around her champagne flute, knuckles white. Somewhere behind her, a guest's fork clinked against a plate, the smallest sound in an expanding silence. Then she mentioned a photograph, a single image that could change everything. Gasps rippled through the room as she lifted a small screen and pressed play. The projector lit up the wall behind her. There, frozen in time, her sister and the secret lover's stolen touch beneath the fairy lights. The sister's face drained of color. Whispers rose like wind through the crowd. The lover's wife dropped her napkin, stunned. The music cut off mid-note. The room became a portrait of shock. Silence stretched so thick it felt alive. The sister stumbled to her feet, voice shaking, insisting it was misunderstood. But the evidence spoke louder. The bride didn't shout. She didn't gloat. She simply said, "You wanted the spotlight. Now you have it." Cameras flashed, guests murmured, and the illusion shattered completely. The sister's face crumpled under the weight of exposure. The bride stepped away from the microphone, leaving her sister drowning in the truth she had built herself. The air felt heavy, the music long gone. Guests whispered like spectators at a slow-motion car crash. The sister stood in the center of the hall, mascara streaking down her cheeks, muttering broken excuses that no one believed. The lover's wife rose from her seat, her expression unreadable, and quietly walked out. The groom looked from one sister to the other, disbelief etched across his face. The bride didn't chase attention. She simply watched her sister's empire crumble under its own weight. Sometimes the cruelest revenge is letting truth speak for itself. The sister tried to speak again, her words dissolving into sobs. "It wasn't like that," she gasped, but no one came to her defense. The bride rose slowly, her dress whispering across the floor. "You canceled my wedding," she said softly, "because you thought I didn't deserve happiness. But tell me, how does it feel to lose everything just to be seen?" The words hung like smoke in the air, impossible to breathe through. A single tear slipped down her cheek, not for her sister, but for everything that could have been love. Then came the final blow. The projector flickered again, revealing text messages, screenshots the bride had saved for weeks, messages filled with promises, meetings, hotel room numbers. Gasps spread through the crowd like wildfire. The sister's knees buckled as she clutched the table, begging her sister to stop. But the bride didn't need to say another word. The truth now had witnesses. The room wasn't hers anymore. It was the sister's cage, built from her own lies. The mother rose from her seat, trembling, eyes glossy with a mix of rage and disbelief. "You've disgraced us," she whispered to her youngest daughter. The sister reached for her, but the mother stepped back. For the first time, the woman who'd always taken her side turned away. The betrayal that once belonged to one sister now came full circle. The hall grew colder, quieter, as the bride exhaled deeply, releasing years of resentment with that single breath. The guests began to leave, murmuring apologies, pretending not to stare. The sister crumpled into a chair, mascara staining her palms. The groom approached the bride slowly, his voice trembling as he said, "I never knew." She met his gaze, but said nothing. Some truths didn't need forgiveness, only distance. Then she turned toward the exit, each step echoing like closure. Behind her, the fairy lights flickered one last time before fading to black. The spotlight, at last, belonged to no one. The morning after felt eerily still, like the world had paused to watch the aftermath. The estate, once overflowing with celebration, now looked like the ruins of a dream. Abandoned tables, withered roses, and wine-stained napkins scattered like confessions. She stood on the balcony overlooking the empty lawn, the air heavy with regret and rain. Below, the staff cleaned quietly, pretending not to notice the echoes of last night's disaster. In that silence, she realized revenge doesn't heal. It only clears the fog so you can finally see what was already broken. She heard footsteps behind her. The groom. His voice was gentle but weighed down by confusion. "You should fold me," he said quietly. She didn't turn around. There were no words that could untangle the mess between love, loyalty, and betrayal. "I needed to see who would stand by me," she whispered. The silence that followed told her everything. When she finally looked, his eyes held no anger, just exhaustion. Love had survived too much truth to keep pretending. Downstairs, the sister packed her bags in silence. The once proud eyes now stared hollow at the mirror, her reflection unrecognizable. Her phone buzzed. Unknown numbers, gossip reporters, missed calls. Every secret she'd guarded had spilled into the open. She tried wiping her makeup, but the smudges stayed, like stains she couldn't wash away. When the door opened, she didn't look up. The bride entered, calm, composed. They didn't speak. Sometimes silence screams louder than words. The mother found them both there. Two daughters, broken in different ways. Her voice cracked as she said, "This family is finished if you keep hating each other." The bride turned to her, tears shimmering but controlled. "We were finished long before the wedding," she replied. The mother's eyes filled with something deeper than sadness, recognition. For the first time, she saw the damage her favoritism had left behind. She reached for her youngest, but the girl stepped back. Forgiveness had left the room long ago. Later that day, as cars lined up to leave, the bride stood at the gates, suitcase in hand. Guests avoided her eyes, offering half-hearted smiles of pity. The estate behind her was silent now, its beauty hollowed by truth. She took one last look. Not at the venue, not at the decorations, but at the place where everything had fallen apart so she could finally rebuild herself. When the car door closed, it wasn't escape. It was rebirth. Sometimes you have to lose the fairy tale to remember who you are. Without it, weeks passed, and silence replaced the storm. The news had spread far beyond the estate. Photos, whispers, judgment. Yet, in that chaos, she found peace. Her mornings were quiet now. Coffee tasted real again. She no longer checked her phone for messages that never came. Sometimes she replayed the night in her mind, not with bitterness, but with clarity. The truth hadn't destroyed her. It had set her free. The love she thought she lost was never hers to begin with. What she gained instead was herself. Across town, her sister hid from the world. The cameras had moved on, but the shame lingered like smoke. Calls went unanswered, doors unopened. She stared endlessly at old photographs. Two smiling girls in matching dresses, back when jealousy was still love in disguise. She whispered apologies into the empty room, hoping someone, anyone, might hear. But forgiveness can't grow where honesty never lived. The spotlight she once craved had turned into a prison of silence. One afternoon, an envelope arrived at the bride's door. Inside, a small note, her sister's handwriting, shaky and uneven. It read, "I never wanted your life. I just wanted to feel seen." She folded the letter carefully and tucked it into her journal. Forgiveness didn't come instantly, but something inside her softened. Maybe one day they'd stand in the same room again and not feel broken. But today, it was enough to know she didn't hate her anymore. That evening, she walked along the shoreline near her apartment, shoes in hand, waves brushing her ankles. Each step felt lighter than the last. She smiled. Not the kind that hides pain, but the kind that means survival. The sunset painted the sky in coral and violet, reflecting on the water like melted glass. She realized healing isn't loud or sudden. It's quiet, patient, and honest. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't anyone's shadow. She was her own light. Some say weddings are meant to unite families, but sometimes they reveal the fractures that were always there. The bride didn't marry that week. and maybe she never would. Yet as she stood beneath the open sky, wind lifting her hair, she finally understood the day her wedding was ruined was also the day her life began. The story wasn't about a lost love or a jealous sister. It was about freedom, and as the tide carried away the last traces of the past, she whispered goodbye, not with sorrow, but with peace.